I think if you've got dependents, that's definitely something you should be looking at. If I dropped down dead, I couldn't give a monkeys. And also if you've got nobody to bury you, the council will take you up the tip. It's fine.
What's it called? Potter's Field, isn't it? Where you get
well, it used to be
up
called
the
that.
tip.
But, no, they're not going to leave you in your flat rotting. Put it like that.
Welcome to Own It, Your Business and Your Life, with Nicola Cairncross and Judith Morgan. In this podcast, we're going to cover everything you need to embrace to become a successful entrepreneur, marketing, money, and much, much more. How to create a business doing just what you love. How to own it, your business and your life. This one will be fast, funny, feisty, and very lively. So sit back and enjoy the show.
Hello, Nicola. How are you? How's your week been?
It's been different, Judith, to how it normally is, because a friend of mine got sick suddenly, and I've spent the majority of it in hospital, courtesy of the various hospitals actually. And they've been interesting times, but I haven't really got much. Actually, that's not true. I've been working in between at a very intense pace. So I've come in, get changed, do a bit of work, the really basic essential stuff, and then go out again.
So you've been a bit of Florence Nightingale, have you?
Well, yes, uncharacteristically for me, because I'm not really.
Yeah, I was going to say, how's your nursing skills?
Actually, my mummying skills are very good, so I've brought those to bear. But the interesting thing I found about myself is, when I'm at home and I put something in the microwave, I can't even bear to wait for a minute for it to warm up. I've discovered the capacity in myself for sitting peacefully for hours at a time, doing absolutely nothing. Not even reading a book, which is interesting.
Brilliant.
Never thought I was capable.
Oh, brilliant! I tell you, the trick with the microwave is to leave the room, because if I stand in the room and watch it, it takes forever. If I go to my desk and do something, it's very quick.
I know. There's like the kettle, isn't it? The new kettle that boils a lot quicker than the old one. That's for sure. So yeah,
also the other thing, your thing about working in short, sharp bursts. Some of my clients can only do that because they're mummies or poorly or whatever. And I am of the view, and we discussed this here before, that it can be more efficient sometimes than sitting there for 7 hours straight.
Totally agree. And I've got as much done, I think. I've got the essentials done, and the other thing it's made me do is really reevaluate my priorities, which we're going to talk about in the Client Challenge of the Week, so I won't go there. But
okay.
The other thing that really impressed me, oh my God, I was in heaven, Judith, was that Britain's Got Talent moment where that girl came on, Emma Jones.
The one that looks like a Subo light.
Well, yes. She was so... I don't know whether she's marginally special needs or not, but she was so sweet and awkward and sang like an absolute angel. I knew there was something coming good because I missed Britain's Got Talent because it was all kicking off with my friend on Saturday night, but I knew something was good because you posted was that a Susan Boyle moment, and I thought, oh my God, I'm so good. I'll wait till
Actually, it was a bit Sharon Gaskin, but I did agree with her, yes. I'm not sure, I'm a bit snobbish. I expect your sister Heather would agree with me. I'm a bit snobbish about the ones that attempt classical singing on Britain's Got Talent because the judges and the audience love it. But the people that know about classical music know it's not all that good. But I agree, what was really good about it was whether or not she had actually been mediocre at singing or a bit better than that. It was how she kind of unfurled in the appreciation of the audience and the judges, because she was all hunched with what life had done to her.
Yeah, and it was interesting because when Simon said, because it sounded pretty good to me, I've got to say, but then I'm not
It wasn't bad. It wasn't brilliant.
Simon said, when your voice is good, it's very good, and
yes.
And as they were talking about her being hunched over, she actually made a real conscious effort to stand up and straighten her neck and everything, didn't she? Which was
Yeah, she did. But I think she's, people who are hunched like that, you're protecting yourself against the world. You could see everything about her. She'd had a difficult life, I think.
Yeah.
But, and I think what the audience love in those moments is that, so many ordinary people have a talent which most of us are not brave enough to bring to the world.
Yeah, it was a classic BGT moment. I loved it. I
love that program. I think we're coming up for the full-on week, and then it ends for a year, and I'm quite happy as well.
And then the X Factor starts with Ollie Murs
surely not yet. Surely not till August. We get the summer off, don't we? Because I find those things they require such an emotional commitment. They exhaust you.
I love a nice club on a Saturday night. It's my favourite way to spend the time. What about your week then?
Well, it's been a week of actually quite the opposite of yours. You've had big drama. In this section, when I was preparing for this yesterday, I thought, well, I have no idea what I'm going to tell Nicola. It's been a week of very tiny, subtle things, so much so that I had to dig quite deep to find them. And the best thing that's happened to me in the last week is that an old client has returned. Now, she's not old. She's a previous client, is what I mean. And actually, it's lovely, isn't it, when an old client comes back, because that's so... Yes, it is. Anyway, we worked closely together, but not for 6 or 7 years. But what was good about her coming back was, and this was a good realisation for me as well, is that when we had her induction call yesterday, she assumed I was going to insist she did all sorts of things that she didn't want to do. And she was slightly hunched against that, in preparation. Oh, Judy's going to make me do my sums and all this kind of thing. But I asked her that, that rather cheesy and trick coaching question, which is, if money was no object, what would you do? And this was a woman with that I knew was going to be challenging, because what she'd started to do was list tons of projects. I'm doing this, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing this, and I'm doing this. But when I asked her the trick question, she only wanted to do the one thing. And, I have this thing that we are all like a stick of rock, and if you break it in half, there's a word inside, which is your word, which describes what you're on this planet for. And this woman's an author, a published author. She's had 4 or 5 books published, but she's gone off to flirt with all sorts of other things. And now she's come back to her writing. And she said, well, I want to go back to being a writer. So, it's always good. It's always good to surprise a client. She was surprised that I said, well, you've got to be a writer then, haven't you? And what that reflects for me is that actually in those 6 or 7 years we've been apart, my clients have caused me to see life differently, which is what's really important to do is what you're here for.
Yes, but so many people don't know what that is, isn't it?
Well, I think most do, actually. I've not met many people who can't answer that question. The occasional one or two, yeah.
I think that's because we move in circles where people have done a bit of navel gazing, and you don't go looking for a coach unless you want to achieve something. But I think that the great majority of people, that question is never even asked of them.
Oh, that's a good point. Yes.
Oh, there's a client challenge of the week in there. How to discover what's the one thing you're meant to do.
Yes. Okay. Well, I'll note that down, and we'll do it. We'll do it perhaps next week.
Okay. All right. Cool. So, what's fueled your fire this week?
Let me have a think. What's fueled my fire here? I'm looking at my notes. They're not making any sense. Oh yes, I know. I remember. I had an approach from a high-profile UK coach towards the end of last week, who I have coached. Actually, I'm not coaching her right now, but I have coached her. I really like her. I admire her a lot. She's fun. And she asked me if I would be available to take over some of her baby clients, because like you, she's confessed she's not patient enough to work with the non-action takers. She sounded just like you when she was talking to me. And she's moving up in the world, and, her clients down the bottom of her pile, as it were. They're not that she doesn't like them or appreciate them or anything, but they're not in her ideal client bracket anymore. She wanted to know would I take them over. I thought it was really nice to be asked, actually.
Yeah.
And I thought, and you know how I love it when an offer comes to me and I don't have to go looking for it.
Yeah.
And also I thought it was nice that she knew enough about me from having worked with me that I would appreciate those clients. And so that what fueled my fire about that. Nice to be asked, nice not to have to work for the opportunity, nice to have my niche appreciated. It was an honour actually, because she is quite high profile and she does do very good work. I felt honoured. That's fueled my fire.
And the other thing is, it means your marketing's working, because it means that she was very clear about the kind of clients you work with well and love to work with, which means that just from not having worked with you for a while herself, she's been watching on presumably social media.
Yes, I think she receives my newsletter every week as well. And so yes, no, that's a good point. Thanks, Nicola. What about you?
Automatic Customers book that you recommended. I've been sitting in various hospital locations reading it, because of course I can't cope with an iPad, reading on an iPad. I just don't like it. And I needed something to fill some time occasionally, and I've really, really enjoying it. I'm only halfway through it. I love the fact that he makes a really strong business case, and it's I can't remember the chap's name, but he wrote the book Built to Sell. And he says, doesn't he, that if he had written that Built to Sell book again, he would have spent at least half of it devoting it to recurring revenue customers. And he outlines 9 specific business models of how you can turn your business into a recurring revenue business. And what I like about it is lots of lovely case studies, lots of stories about how businesses have done it, and inspirational case studies.
Me too. I'm going to write a blog post about this week, because there was something I remember reading when I was a younger woman about the post office. This was when the post office was the post office before it became Royal Mail, and they pointed out to all of us, because we were in a sort of direct mail context, that getting a client is the hard bit. Why not keep them? And the automatic customer, that's what it does. You've only got to get them once, because the income goes on recurring. And I think that's very attractive. But what I noticed after I read that book, and I do want to read it a second time, and it was very readable and very fast, what I noticed was you start noticing them everywhere then. So, for instance, I do my grocery shopping every week at Ocado. I haven't bought this. I'm not particularly susceptible. Is that the word? I'm not particularly susceptible to being a customer of one of these. But every week I go online to order my groceries. They try to sell me this annual delivery pass for 47 quid, which would be so much cheaper than me paying it weekly. But I prefer the flexibility somehow of paying it weekly. And Amazon Prime is an example of this, isn't it? Because they've made that more and more attractive. It used to be just free postage, but now it's free postage and lending libraries and videos and all sorts of things like that. And you get that 97 quid bump if you're Amazon once a year, and that's fantastic.
I'm very resistant to buying things that are annual payments. I absolutely hate them, because I've got this thing from when I was poor, that the annual payment will come out and when you're least expecting it, and put you in a hole financially. So I'm very resistant to annual payments, but I'm very, very susceptible to good deals if it's a monthly payment, even if it costs slightly more. Which I always say to people when they're talking about instalments, that the richer people definitely always go for annual ones. And I always say, don't forget about the other clients who wouldn't sign up to an annual but will sign up.
I definitely think we have to offer both, because my experience is over the years I've been coaching that some people will take the money out of their deposit account to achieve the 12 for the price of 10
discount,
and the other people will want instalments, and so it's a nice mixture. Actually, you do need to cater to both sorts of people, I think.
And the other thing the book really pointed out, that really drove home to me, talk about Amazon Prime as a great example. And apparently Kindle are starting to do this now. You pay something like $10 a month and you get unlimited Kindle books, which, it's the thing.
It's not unlimited. Well, I think it is unlimited. You only have a certain number at a time, but it's like a lending library, yes, which basically means you need never pay for if you read more than 10 quid's worth a month, which is really only 2, the rest of them are free.
Yeah, which is awesome. But the interesting thing I found about it was that they all started doing it in order to get data about their customers. It wasn't even the revenue that they were so keen on. It was the fact, it weeds out the people who are never going to pay for anything, because, that people who pay for things are obviously better customers. And B, it gives you incredible data about your customers and what they like to buy. And there's quite a lot of, examples of sort of snack boxes and things like that, where, Grays, for example, they're testing out the things that they could then sell in their shops by seeing what people like and give good feedback on in the little boxes.
Yes.
So yeah, that's.
I don't think either of us would ever want to go into the physical supply, though. I think we'd want to be in the digital supply area, wouldn't we?
Oh, definitely, yeah. But it's making me think quite hard, especially after the events of this week.
Do you feel isolated and alone in running your own home-based business? Do you have worries, doubts, fears and resistance which sometimes make you feel like giving up? Don't worry, you're not alone. In fact, you're perfectly normal. It can be scary all by yourself. But what if you could learn how to become a confident business owner, how to trust yourself more and grow your income, relax and be more creative and productive? Small Business Big Magic is a unique business mentoring group providing grounded practical support and advice, fast responses to your questions, inspiration and solutions to boost your clarity and help you find direction, focus and success in your life and business. Join Small Business Big Magic today for the friendship and encouragement of others just like you and the enthusiasm of a coach who gets you and your business. There's big magic for your small business at judithmorgan.com.
So, client challenge of the week. Then let's talk about it.
Yes, it's yours. You're bringing it this week.
Yes, well, it's a twofold thing, really. A friend of mine is not very well, and he's a freelancer, and I'm obviously self-employed. And I've had to step in and be with this person, and also to sort out some practical stuff. So I've had to rearrange my diary quite dramatically, which I have been able to do. Luckily, I don't know if I told you a couple of weeks ago, I've had mornings blocked out. Apart from Wednesday morning when we talk, I don't actually have anything in my diary until 2:00 in the afternoon. And that's made life very much easier because when it was all going off over the weekend, I was able to think to myself, well, I haven't got anything that I absolutely have to do until Tuesday at 2:00 because I don't do anything. I only do things on Tuesday afternoons, Wednesday daytimes and Thursday afternoons. So that definitely took a lot of stress out of the situation. And I was thinking to myself, God, how do people who've got real day jobs or people who've got, say, for example, software designers where they've got time critical clients who will not be very happy if they disappear for a week at a time. How do people cope? How do we suggest that our clients set themselves up so that they should life get in the way, which it regularly does, they don't get, what's the word I'm looking for, scuppered by the worst events?
Well, I think there are a couple of things to think about first, which is, I think I've said this on the podcast once before, what I'm always amazed about is, it normally takes people 3 weeks to get an appointment with me, unless you die, in which case I can clear my diary for a funeral rather quickly. Yeah. So, if there's a death or you're seriously ill, I don't think your clients mind, to be honest. What I think is difficult because it's a life-threatening situation and they want the best for you. Yeah. But I think what we probably should legislate for, and some of my clients have had it recently, is that sort of lurgy where you don't really feel like doing anything and you're below par for 3 weeks at a time. I think that's more of a threat in a funny sort of a way. And what you're talking about is a safety net or a form of insurance policy. I'm not talking about literal insurance. I'm talking about, where you protect yourself against what could go wrong. I don't know. I think mostly we're all vulnerable to this.
Yes, but you don't realise it until it happens. You all feel invincible, don't you?
Well, I think you do when you're younger. I don't think I feel invincible, but my accountant asked me a question this week, what is work in progress? And I said, well, it's all the advance payments I've taken from clients that I haven't delivered yet. And if anything were to happen to me, it would need to be repaid to them. And so, just the sentence beginning, if anything were to happen to me, puts you on notice that you have to make provision for what happens. I mean, I think the reason why I haven't really ever done that is I am very fortunate in my health.
Yeah. So so that's an interesting question. So I know from an accounting point of view that if you're taking money in for services that are going to be delivered in the future, you need to put that money aside and then say, for example, in a deposit account and then pay yourself out of that deposit account into your current account as you deliver the services.
Well, ideally you do. Ideally,
yeah.
But actually, whether or not you do that, you do have to account for it in your accounts, i.e. you have to say I've been prepaid for services I haven't delivered yet, because they don't go into this year's accounts, they go into the year's accounts where you do deliver the service. So it's a prepayment. You've been prepaid in effect.
Yeah, I don't do anything prepaid. I just do it month by month. But so what would you suggest someone does in that situation? Would you suggest they take out an insurance policy just for the amount that they generally have?
No, I wouldn't. It's much cheaper to do what you said, which is stick it in your deposit account and pay yourself from it as you deliver. And I think that's what we all wish we could do. We wouldn't. I don't think you could get an insurance policy for that. I'm trying to think of. I think you could get an insurance policy for quite a lot. You could get an insurance policy if you're a self-employed person for being sick.
Can you? Because I mean,
yes, you can. Yes, you can. No, you can.
You can. Do they pay out? That's my question.
Yes, they do. It's expensive, particularly for women, interestingly, because the medical profession believes that more goes wrong with women than with men.
More working parts.
Exactly right. Yes, and I've always called it permanent sickness. I think it's called permanent health insurance, but there is something called permanent health insurance. I've never taken it because I never expected to be ill, but I do think, I think insurance is a racket, and I think we should learn to be our own insurer. And if you put the money in your deposit account and pay yourself when you earn it, then that's effectively being your own insurer, and it hasn't cost you anything.
Both of those solutions require a large amount of self-discipline, don't they?
They do, which us self-employed people are not known for, because cash flow is the problem. It's not if you have automated customers, of course. That's another benefit of that book, which is it irons out your cash flow.
Absolutely, yes, and that is, that cash flow is one of the most stressful things about being self-employed. So yeah. I'd strongly urge anyone listening to get this book and read it fast and implement it immediately, because even people like website designers, for example, can have a recurring revenue model where they update people's plugins, themes, and keep their websites secure. And time again, it's been proven that one should invest in something like that, because things always go wrong when you least want them to.
Well, that's where insurance comes back into the picture, funnily enough. My dad always used to say insurance is expensive until the day you need it.
Yeah.
And I think there are some things that need to be insured against and some that don't. And what you've just described there is a form of insurance policy, because if you've invested a lot of time and money in your website, you want to protect it by making sure those things are updated all of the time. So I agree with you there very much. Let's go back to the illness thing. I think there's another way of looking at this, which is that by and large we manage. When life throws poo at us, by and large we manage. So, for instance, the friend you're talking about was fortunate to have you to step in and help. And people, I think, are very... It's not just you that stepped in and helped, there's other people as well. People are very available and kind when one is in need, I think, as long as you can bring yourself to ask.
Yes, and lots of people can't, can they? But
no.
But people are incredibly kind. I mean, I'm going to talk about that in Who or What's Impressed section.
Yeah.
Okay, so in
family, maybe. I don't know. It would be worth. I'll tell you what it would be worth doing. It would be worth everybody having a listen, thinking about this, and you and I included. And let's not come up with any answers today for you and I, but let's have a think, all of us. If I were poorly for a day, what would it mean? If I were poorly for a week, what would it mean? If I were poorly for a month, what would it mean? If I were poorly for a year, what would it mean? And I think we would need different solutions for each of those timescales. And then you've got to evaluate how likely you think that is or unlikely, and make provision accordingly. And depending on what your business is, if you're alone in it, probably good to have an alliance. So, for instance, in the cleaning biz, what happens is when you go on holiday, another branch looks after your phone calls for you. Probably good to have an alliance with somebody in a similar line of work who could step in. And in my case, that wouldn't work because the relationship between me and my clients is unique. Now, when I am poorly, what I do is strip back everything extraneous, and I'm just there for the clients. But if I were hospitalised, I suppose I'd have to ask for a month off, and I'm sure they'd be fine with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And with me, I'm actually training up someone to be able to maintain at least and start campaigns, even if they might not necessarily be able to sell. They would definitely.
Okay, so I'll tell you what this is, Nicola. It's called a risk assessment.
Oh, okay.
big businesses do this all the time. You know, you assess the risks in your business and you make provision accordingly. So, you know, it might be possible to work out where you're vulnerable. If you couldn't work, what would happen?
Yeah, and also things like how many, you know, am I dependent for more than 50% of my income from one client and things like that.
Yes.
It's all, yeah. I mean, you know, think about, you know, our friend Suzanne, who got sick last year, all very suddenly, and the most healthy person on the planet. You know, so I think this whole thing about assessing whether it could happen to you, you've got to assume it can. And luckily, she had financial provision in place, having, you know, worked really hard all her life and just sold her flat. But she would have been, you know, in a different country with no health insurance and really up the creek without a paddle. And
there are two insurance. There are two sorts. That sort of illness that she had is exactly the sort of thing that the insurance cover I was talking about, permanent health, is available for.
I mean, I've got some kind of insurance where if anything happens to me, there's a sum paid out, which is over and above what I need for my funeral, over and above what I would need to sort all my business affairs out, and would give the children enough for a deposit for a flat each. And that's
you dropping down dead, isn't it? That doesn't solve.
No, it's 50-50 actually. It's half death or serious illness. It's serious illness, incapacity to work as well.
And what's the monthly premium, Nicola?
Just under £100 a month, which actually felt painful when I started it, but now I'm used to it and I'm glad of it.
I think if you've got dependents, that's definitely something you should be looking at. You know, if I dropped down dead, I couldn't give a monkeys. You know, and also if you've got nobody to bury you, the council will take you up the tip. It's fine.
What's it called? Potter's Field, isn't it? Where you get
well, it used to be called that. But, no, they're not going to leave you in your flat rotting, put it like that.
No, I suppose someone has to take responsibility ultimately, don't they? Anyway, this is all very gloomy, isn't it?
It's just a bit gloomy, yes. So the question of the week is, let's all do a risk assessment on where we are or are not vulnerable to health threats and other issues. It could be, for instance, water pouring through your ceiling, which means you've got to go and live somewhere else and without Wi-Fi or something. Do you know what I mean?
God!
Well, just what I'm saying. It might not be health. Where is my business vulnerable?
Yeah.
And what would happen? What's my emergency plan? The disaster recovery, it's called in big business. What's my disaster recovery plan?
Yeah. And
if you're a bank, for instance, you need to keep trading, otherwise your customers are up in arms.
Yeah, absolutely. And I did have a moment of overwhelming relief on Monday when I realised that because I bought that laptop to go to Malta, which I couldn't actually use when I was out there, and I was thinking it was a waste of money. And I do have a dongle, a 3 dongle, which I could get broadband quality connection anywhere in the country. I could actually just go and work in the hospital. And as it happened, I haven't had to do that, but I could have done as a backup plan, which gave me a huge measure of relief, knowing that I could.
Will you do it for me one day just to prove whether or not it works? I've not met many people that have said to me, "Oh, my dongle is wonderful." I'd love to hear that your dongle is wonderful in hospital.
When I moved in here, I didn't get broadband for 2 weeks, and I had to go round to Irving's to work. And one day I went round to Irving's to work, and there was no broadband because BT had cut them off or something. I can't remember exactly what happened. And I managed to work for an entire week, including recording webinars. So it must have been extremely. You can have up to 5 people on my dongle playing computer games and all sorts. So it must be pretty.
Okay, so your dongle does work.
Yes,
whenever my clients tell me they're going to work off a dongle, I think, oh dear.
Well, it depends how good it is. It cost me £70, so it's up to 5 people in a residence at broadband speed. So it must be quite good.
And it cost you £70. Is there a recurring charge as well?
No, there's nothing you're not locked into. You can buy packets of time, a bit like you do in hotels, but it's something like. I mean, I think I paid £30 for the week, and I was able to record, about 5 webinars and do all my work on it, and didn't have any issue at all.
Okay, well that's quite good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, so that's a good example, you see. So it's not just illness, there's all other things. It's interruption to normal service, isn't it?
The only thing I really struggle with, like last week, was next door decided to do extensive DIY, extensive planing in the garden, drilling in the kitchen, erecting scaffolding outside the back and the front of the house. You can't legislate for noise, that's the problem.
Well, it's interesting you should bring that up because one of my challenges of the week and every week for the foreseeable future is that yesterday I received a letter saying that the freeholder of my building wants to excavate the basement to create another flat down there. Which
Oh
means
my God!
I am, if he gets planning permission, I am about to go through months and months and months of that.
Oh, right. Well, you better find somewhere else to go and work at least 2 hours a day then.
Well, if I'm on Skype, it could be a problem. Anyway, we'll see. We'll see.
Okay, so what's our word of the week then, Judith?
Mine's passion.
Oh.
Specifically for gardens. It's the Chelsea Flower Show this week, and I watched one of the programmes on television last night, and I was amazed by the number of, I mean, I knew this, it's people by nutters, absolute obsessives whose work is about perfection. They don't sleep for 2 months. They do months and months of hard work. After the Chelsea Flower Show ends, which is May, they have the summer off, but by next October, they're planning for the following May. Some of these people have won 70 consecutive annual medals for excellence, basically. And I saw a couple this week, a couple of nutters, lovely nutters that don't, because they're nuts about plants. And their plant was cacti of various different sorts. And every year they go to the Chelsea Flower Show and exhibit in a different outfit that has a cactus theme. You would have loved them because they were Vegas type eccentrics, actually. But the passion that these people have, and what I heard one of the journalists say was what it takes is care, dedication, and a lot of love. And I thought, really, that applies to businesses too, doesn't it? Care, dedication, and a lot of love. You can't do that unless you're passionate about what you're doing. Months and months of hard work, not sleeping for 2 months. I mean, I do know this about the people that exhibit there, and of course it's not the only, showcase for excellence in any field, but, to be at the top of your game, you've got to be passionate.
Yes, I think you do. And if you're not passionate about the whole thing, to be passionate about part of it helps. So,
well, I mean, these people have got undying love that sustains them for whole careers.
Yes. I mean, my nanny was the most passionate gardener I've ever come across, and my granddad. Yeah, they were always to be found out there. Their garden was an absolute treat. I remember it as being a complete idyll as a child. It was amazing. And
I think everybody should have. My equivalent would be reading, really, but it would be better for us all if it was gardening. But I mean, I love looking at my garden. I don't really want to do it, but I do think in every life you should have something that you feel that passionate about. Whether it's your business or not doesn't really matter to me. But if you're passionate about your garden, that's great. They've got a reason to live, haven't they?
Absolutely. My sister's got rather passionate about making jewellery. Heather, the singing sister, she sits there with a pair of glasses on the end of her nose, a very bright light over her, and a big tray full of teeny tiny things that are really beautiful. And it gives her something to, when she goes on tour, it gives her something to go and find the local bead shop and hunt it on the internet. So it's an all-consuming passion for making actually the most stunning jewellery. Really, really beautiful stuff.
I think she's still quite passionate about her music. Otherwise, in fact, there's a programme on ITV right now where she sings the theme tune. Did you know that?
Oh, she told me that last night, and she said that you did as well.
Well, I tell you what I'd said. The programme is really, I'd rather gouge my eyes out. But what I noticed on the very first episode that I tried was, gosh, that's an interesting sounding theme tune. And then a few days later, I saw Heather posting that she was singing on it. And I thought, well, I noticed that. It was brilliant.
Oh, my God, I'm going to have to go and have a listen now because I've got no idea.
I think she's still passionate about her music. And you can tell that she's still passionate about her music. I know travelling is a bore and everything, but, the performance level, she's still passionate about that.
I've got some rather good news. She's starting to think about the next album.
Oh, good.
Starting to put together, ideas for the next album, which I'm absolutely thrilled about, because those two friends of hers dying back to back really knocked the stuffing out of her on the creative front. But she's definitely
coming back.
Yeah, it's coming back, which I'm thrilled about. So, so she's actually performing. This is rather sweet. She's actually performing with Dave Newton, who she did the album with, and another chap whose name escapes me, but who's also incredibly well known in the jazz world. And they're performing for two 80-year-old gentlemen who live in Stenning, I hope they don't listen to this podcast or I'm ruining the surprise, but I think it's unlikely.
So do I.
So it's a secret surprise party for these two gentlemen. It's a joint party, and they've wheeled in their three favourite jazz people to play as a complete surprise, and Heather to sing 2 45-minute sets. And she says she's really, really looking forward to it, but she's a little bit worried about the impact the surprise is going to have.
Yeah. It's at that stage of life. Yeah,
I'm
gorgeous.
My dad's 50th, we were all a bit concerned about that, but he got. Well, also as we paid on his credit card for my brother Alex to come from Australia as a surprise, because he said that was the one thing he wanted, and
nice.
None of us had any money, so we paid for it on Dad's card. And he turned up at 6 o'clock in the morning to say happy birthday. We thought that might finish him off.
Yes, no, there's a risk of that. I agree. So now tell me, do you have a word of the week?
I do, and funnily enough, it's action. I wrote it down before we started speaking at all this morning, which is really funny, isn't it? Because the whole thing about sitting in a hospital, it's a machine that grinds exceedingly slow. And if you're waiting for X-ray, or you're waiting for transport, or you're waiting for the consultant to come and see you, it all takes a lot longer than you think it's going to. And as an action orientated woman myself, I was surprised by my capacity, as I say, to sit and do nothing for hours and just think, but then interesting you talking about that thing where you've been asked to work with that other coach and
yes,
because you're known for being patient with non-action takers.
Yes.
It's just the whole thing of taking action, and I haven't been able to take action. Everyone's asking me for a Facebook ads course, and I just haven't had time to even think about it, let alone put it all together this week. So
well, you haven't got the emotional room either, Nicola, because you're coping with your friend being poorly.
Yeah, but action. Are you an action taker? Are you someone who finds it really difficult to take action? Nothing happens without someone taking action, and we've all got our different perceptions about how quick or slow that action can be. And the fact that you're more patient with people who find it harder to take action, whereas I've always been, we're both action.
Interestingly, I tell you what it is. I see it. I don't see them as non-action takers. I see them as people who may have in their lives taken an awful lot of action in the past and may again in the future, but are at the moment going through something which may be, for instance, a divorce that requires you to take a lot of care of yourself rather than initially channeling it into action per se, which is what's that thing called where it's like a a thing to distraction. I think that the people I am patient with, that you all say I'm patient with, are people who are going through something where action is not what's required. It's thoughtfulness, funnily enough. You said you sat there thinking. I mean, I think what you were going through with that person requires thinking. It requires processing. It requires, what does this mean for all of us? What are the lessons in here for me to learn about life? Do you know what I mean? There's times for action. I think if you took action every day forever, at the high level you're talking about, you just have burnout.
Yeah.
And some of these clients are going through burnout for one sort or another, and it doesn't mean that they're not growing. It means that they're in a different phase. If you think of it like a butterfly, you're in that cocoon for a long time, and then you emerge as this beautiful thing. They're emerging quite often, or they're reinventing themselves. So actually, it requires a different sort of patience. It requires me to be with them and not say, "Oh, for goodness sake, pull your finger out." It isn't one of those things that can be rectified by that. It's sort of personal growth through change, and that's cocooning sometimes.
Yeah, I do remember someone saying to me, I think it might have been the inimitable Rachel Turner. She said, I remember saying to her one time, it all feels like I'm just wading through treacle and I can't get anywhere. And she said that's often that's the dark before the dawn. Often you have to go through that treacle wading phase before you have a real breakthrough.
I do think sometimes these clients get very impatient with themselves as well. And I would caution less action in times of high emotional drama. So your children are leaving home and going to university, and you're dealing with separation issues. you and your partner are splitting up. Some, you're looking after a parent who's either died or dying, or they're moving house and you've got to clear out all of their possessions. Those sort of life, I don't know, call them rituals, the stage of life ritual.
Yeah.
I suppose it's as we're all getting a bit older, and some of my clients are, the younger ones are having babies, the older ones, the children are leaving home. Next after that is they're being bereaved, all of those kind of things. A typical middle-aged client who's just really starting to be quite senior in their career or in their business would typically have quite a lot of those going on. They might be getting divorced, the children might be going to university, their parents might be dying. And actually there's only so much you can do when you've got a lot of life calls on you, as you've discovered this week.
Yeah, and also one of my clients, a very high-flying lawyer, she had her mother and brother in a car accident, and she was out of action, away from the office for a month. And as she came back, and we had a conversation about something. I said, she had this big event coming up, which was the biggest event of the year for her company, and she said, quite frankly, I'm just simply not stressing about it, because I've had everything put in perspective.
By comparison, yes, I agree. It's it's what's important. Yeah, and I think there's a time for action. That old hippie song that I like, time to reap and a time to sow, whatever it is. There's a time for action, and it's not every day of your life. Although I do think it's good to do one tiny thing every day.
So who or what's impressed you this week then?
Oh, well, another tiny thing. Going back to that returning client, a client before her left me at 3:24, and the new client came in at 3:45. And I always say this to my clients: there's always the loss first. You always lose something before it's replaced. The void is always created first. So I had sort of 20 minutes in loss where you lose a client, you think, oh dear, oh dear, that's a shame. Oh dear, there's a sinking feeling in losing a client. Not all of them, but the majority of them.
Yeah.
And the new one rocked up, 21 minutes later. And my new one, my returning one, is not very woo-woo. She said, I'm not very woo-woo. Fine, you don't need to be woo-woo. But she'd made her investment in working with me in some degree of trepidation, because she's not on an even keel yet financially. But she had to come into the group and say, despite not being very woo-woo, within 24 hours of making my investment here, I'd made it back. And she'd won a prize where, not a prize where she hadn't had to do something. She'd entered a competition. She'd done a piece of work and entered it into a competition, and her prize was exactly what she'd spent in investing with me. So, it's about, what's impressed me is the loss comes first, the risk comes first, and you are rewarded.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true, isn't it? I love that thing of, if you want more, make room for it.
Make room.
Yeah. I remember hearing that right in the early stages of my coaching practice, and that really that does work for me, and it makes you feel so much better having a good old clear out anyway.
Oh, and I love the thing you always used to do, with setting up the file tabs.
Oh, yes.
And I always put more spaces in my online diary and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I still do that in my cash flow spreadsheet. Actually, I have new client
yes,
1, new
yes,
client 20.
Me too. Yeah. What fun. Yeah. Who or what's impressed you, Nicola?
Well, the NHS, Judith. I mean, really, not so, the NHS as a machine, because I've been obviously watching the systems working and having a lot of time to do that. And they work exceedingly slow, as I say, but they do work. And even down to, I went to visit my friend in the hospital in Brighton, and I just assumed there was going to be a car parking, because there was a big multi-storey car park next to it. And I got there at 10:30 in the morning, and it was 1 out, 1 in. And it said actually there was an hour's wait, and I thought, oh, bugger this, I've got no idea where to park in Brighton, so I'm just going to sit and wait if I have to. But it was 1 out, 1 in, and as I went in, this man, the barriers weren't working automatically, and this man was doing it manually, so he was letting people, as people came out, he was letting the people out manually, taking their money manually, and then he was coming over to the inside and lifting the barrier there. But one little thing that really impressed me was he'd actually was taking the trouble to ask the people who were coming out which floor they'd been on.
Oh, brilliant.
So you could then go straight to the floor where the vacancy was. Whether you could park in it was another matter with my big car.
Yes.
But I just thought that was something initiative he was taking himself, and he was trying to make life easier for the customers under very difficult circumstances for him and them. And the other thing that impressed me was the kindness of everyone, Judith. I mean, I'm trying not to get too emotional thinking about it, but everybody was so kind, down to it was very much a machine for processing bodies, and I was very aware of that, and the detachment of the people. There was quite a large degree of a detachment of the people, but they probably have to do that to cope. But when you, for one moment, I sort of had to go to the loo, and I was worried about going off and leaving my friend, and when people saw that I was at the end of my tether, they just stepped up and they were really, really kind. And everybody treated my friend with absolute kindness. And it was really very impressive, the whole thing, the machinery of the NHS, the people who were working it in very difficult circumstances.
They're very, very good in an emergency.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Keeping you alive, matter of life and death, operations, road traffic accidents, emergencies, A&E, fantastic. Chronic, I wouldn't be bothered with it. But, keeping you alive, they're very good at that. And actually, that's what we want them for, really.
Yeah, when you say chronic, do you mean that sort of ongoing stuff?
Yes, yeah, you've got something pettifogging and annoying that's really spoiling your life and it just goes on forever. They can't really do much for that. Yeah. But matter of life and death, ambulance job, they're fantastic at that.
Yeah. And just even down to, the porters right up to the consultants a bit more distant, but we didn't come across one single person who didn't try to do an amazing job. So. And
they are working, as you say, under the most enormous
pressure, but not much money.
Yeah. No, I know.
So good.
They're dedicated. They're dedicated, aren't they? They're dedicated. That's what they are.
Well, they've got passion, a lot of them.
Yeah, they have. Yeah. Yes.
Good stuff. Okay, we managed to get through that without me blubbing, so that was quite nice. You know me, I like a nice blub normally, but not on the podcast.
No, not on the podcast. No blubbing on the podcast. No blubbing and no blubbing on the podcast.
It's a blub-free zone, this podcast.
Oh, thank heavens. Excellent. Nicola.
Excellent. All right, darling. See you same time, same place next week.
Yeah. See you.
Bye.
You've been listening to Nicola Cairncross and Judith Morgan. Do come and visit us at ownitthepodcast.com. We love to hear your feedback. You can find out more about Judith and visit her on her website at judithmorgan.com, and you can find Nicola at nicolacairncross.com.